Thank you all for sticking around. We're really excited to talk to you about our work. I'm going to let Jim kick it off.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you today. We're so excited to talk to you about a specific application of artificial intelligence to a very important issue, human trafficking. And I really appreciate all the setup. A lot of the concepts have been discussed. So one of the main concepts that I think a lot of the previous speakers have talked about is the need for subject matter experts or domain experts in combination with technology. And so ThetaRay, we're an unsupervised machine learning technology that is being applied in a lot of different use cases. Today we're going to focus on the human trafficking aspect, and Rochelle is our subject matter expert for human trafficking. She has a great background. She's been a prosecutor for human trafficking cases, and she runs her own nonprofit organization now that focuses on human trafficking. So maybe we can start. I'll just tell you what we'll go through quickly. We'll talk about the scope of human trafficking in today's world. What are the inhibitors to this problem? And what's AI? What is the type of AI that we're using, and how is it used in combating financial crime? We'll share a couple of use cases with you, and then we'll give a conclusion and a couple takeaways.
So, as you all may know, human trafficking, just to get us all level set on the same definition, is the either sexual or labor servitude, the buying and selling of people, typically secured through force, fraud, and coercion to recruit them into that servitude. And it's estimated that there are over 40 million people every year trafficked, enslaved across the world. In that industry, over $150 billion are laundered across boundaries, across jurisdictions, and across nations annually. And despite the 40 million people being trafficked, in 2016, based on international data sharing and research, the Trafficking Persons Report released by the United States uncovered only 17,880 prosecutions and only 7,000 convictions. So we're not even coming close to doing what we need to do to combat this problem. As a prosecutor in Philadelphia, I prosecuted over 20,000 cases, and I mostly focused on gender-based violence. In that process, what I started doing was a really rudimentary manual version of AI, because I started finding cases that didn't match the trends and patterns that my 10 or 15,000 cases up until that point had indicated in my brain. I got to the point where if I read a arrest summary, I knew exactly what the case was because there was only so many patterns. And when they started defying those patterns, I realized, oh my gosh, this is something different. Human trafficking at that point had only been illegal for less than 5 years in the state that I was in. So we didn't have any cases yet, and we didn't have education or resources. But I was finding human trafficking, and stumbling upon that information, trying to find help, trying to find information was ridiculously difficult. So some of the barriers that we feel at the manual level is that there's no resources, there's no data, and even when we have it, law enforcement doesn't have sophisticated technology to be able to actually analyze it and do something with it. So, for example, when I was prosecuting one case where a 12-year-old girl was being trafficked, in order to do the investigation, I was using Google, and in order to make my network map of the criminal network, I was using Microsoft Paint. Not Microsoft Paint 3D, because at the government we're like 3 iterations of Microsoft behind at any given moment. So it's not sophisticated, we don't have the tools that we need, and so the amount of data that we're able to analyze is very minimal. On top of that, I didn't know how to subpoena the financial records, but whenever I finally figured out, I would get hundreds, sometimes thousands of records of just numbers. Okay, I was a lawyer, I was a literature major, Excel doesn't work with me, numbers don't work with me, and I couldn't just run it through a system to analyze it. So who knows what I missed? So the resources are extremely insufficient and the technology is unsophisticated is the number one problem. The second problem is the industries are siloed. Law enforcement, we have, for example, in the United States, around 20,000 jurisdictions, and they're focused on their geographic area and the crimes happening in the area they're funded and tasked with protecting. They're not worried about the stuff happening outside of their jurisdictions. Traffickers, however, don't just stick to one city, right? They're trafficking across cities, across counties, across states, across nations. And if we're not collaborating and networked the same way they are, That's why millions of cases are falling through the cracks, and we're not actually doing much to end human trafficking. But the siloing is not just at the criminal justice level, it's also at the industry and private sector level. Financial institutions, based on regulations, have to be incredibly protective and private with their data. Transportation industries have significant amounts of data about the movement of people that would be relevant to trafficking. They're not talking to financial institutions, and neither of those are talking to law enforcement. So there's a lot of siloing across so many layers of human trafficking industries and sectors that make it so easy for human trafficking to thrive. So what we've started doing is working with all of those industries across government and private sectors and collecting data, being sort of the neutral arbiter to really bust down those silos. But I can't use Microsoft Paint to do all the analysis. So at that point, we really do need technological tools like artificial intelligence to combat it. And you heard a few talks talking about what is artificial intelligence. There's like millions of ways people use that word. And what we're talking about is finding the tool that's actually doing intelligence analysis, that's actually learning and teaching us, and it's not limited by what we think we know, and it's actually helping us figure out what we need to know. And so it's a perfect marriage of missions between ThetaRay and our organization Collective Liberty, because right now the human trafficking industry is incredibly high profit with almost no risk, because they're running circles around us with technology. So in this type of collaboration around big data and artificial intelligence analysis, we can flip that equation. So once we start going after the money, once we start going after the money, what they actually care about, the profit will significantly decrease, and also the risk's going to be a heck of a lot higher, because we need millions of prosecutions, not thousands, and building these cases based on hard financial data and tracking their money movement and their illicit money flows is the way to actually end it. So we're going to have significant impact with this partnership.
Yeah, the impact, is if you really want to disrupt these networks, they're all for profit. People are trafficking humans mostly to make money. And if you can disrupt the flow of money, you can disrupt these networks. And raising the risk parameters and lowering the profit margins is exactly what's required. And it's a challenge, as Rochelle was saying, because there's such limited coordination. Data privacy is a big issue. You've heard a lot of discussion about data privacy. I'll talk about our technology in a minute, but we're actually able to process encrypted data. So we can actually bring data from a lot of different sources with all of the kinds of privacy and security protections that were discussed previously. The challenge is getting the agencies, the governments, the human trafficking networks aren't constrained by a geography. They're not constrained by regulation or law. They operate freely. And what we're finding is the sophistication of these operations, it makes it very difficult to detect if you don't have the data. I think the speaker before actually talked about, you can't really analyze what you don't have. And so it's very important to be able to gather this data together, but you have to bring together all of these different elements, law enforcement, NGOs, business, governments, banks, and communities, and at the center of that is data technology and analytics. And that's really why, and this is the ecosystem that our partnership is developing. Working across all of these different agencies to bring this kind of data together. So if you think about human trafficking, think about hotels. Hotels have a lot of information. Airlines have a lot of information. Most trafficking I used to think, before I got to know Rochelle, I used to think that human trafficking kind of, they took people, across the border, in the U.S., across the Mexican border, or through Canada, or like that. But actually, most human trafficking occurs through airlines. They actually just fly them in. And so again, working with these different businesses and these different companies that have all of this data, hotels, airlines, ride-hailing services, a lot of the money that's laundered, it's not just through banks. Banks have a lot of the information, but they also use, money service bureaus like, MoneyGram or MoneyTree or Western Union or these types of things. So again, it's bringing together this community and getting the support and starting to have an international cooperation. And the challenge about it, and it was really great, sometimes it's really a challenge being sort of towards the end of the day. People are a little bit tired, but again, most of the points here were made that the existing technology doesn't work. It really doesn't work. You'll never find a zero-day attack. You'll never find an unknown case you'll never find something that you haven't thought of before using a neural net, using supervised machine learning. Because what are you doing? You're training a system to find something you already know about it. It might find it more effectively and more efficiently, but you'll never find a new pattern or a complex pattern that you have never seen before. And that's what's happening. And even the best neural networks, think about it. If you take a neural net, a deep net, and you train it with 1 million pictures of butterflies, it'll identify all kinds of butterflies, all kinds, even if you didn't show it a picture. But what if you showed a scorpion or a snake? It won't identify it because you didn't train it to find that. Now think about anomaly detection. Anomaly detection says, I'll take a neural net, a deep learning, and I'll train a butterfly, and then show me everything that's not a butterfly. And then how many false positives do you want to deal with there? It's very imprecise. These techniques aren't working to really uncover the unknown and the depth of the complexity of these schemes and these workers. So at ThetaRay, I'll tell you just a little bit about our technology. Our technology was developed by two professors. Professor Keyhan, who's the head of applied mathematics at Yale University. He's on the advisory board at DARPA. He's got the Presidential Medal of Science from Bill Clinton. And Professor Amir Averbach, who's a professor here at Tel Aviv University. And I like this slogan over here, in pursuit of the unknowns. Well, that's exactly what we've done, is we've developed unsupervised machine learning technology that finds unknown unknowns. It's not that a lot of the things that were discussed today were described as things of the future. But this technology exists today. It's in production today at large financial institutions. We're working with the United Nations. We're working with a number of government and law enforcement agencies, not just to combat this crime, but many others. And so what we're able to do is we're able to, without any curated data, without any labels, without any training, no predefined rules, models, settings, thresholds, or parameters, we're able to do purely unbiased, fully data-driven analytics in an unsupervised way to identify a suspicious activity, to identify and to find these rings. Now we're going to give you a couple of use cases, and I'll share some details, some practical details about how we've done this in production at a bank. The thing that you have to be able to do is to use this technology is to be able to enhance your detection capabilities. Again, the false positives kill everyone, because all the true things that you find, all the truth in the data, if you do find it, it's lost in the volumes of false positives. And what we find is institutions, whether they're government agencies with limited resources, banks, law enforcement agencies, they spend a lot of their time chasing things that aren't even interesting. They're not even real. The other thing is you want to be able to integrate into your existing ecosystem. Our technology was designed is API-based, so it was designed actually to integrate very quickly. It can be cloud-based, it can be on-premise, but it was designed from the ground up to be able to integrate with existing systems. And again, you want to improve your efficiency. You want to focus on the things that are really important. The other thing that I'll tell you is that transparency. There's a lot of discussion about transparency and explainability. Now again, one of the unique things for us is that our technology is fully transparent. It was designed from the ground up to go from data through detection. Why did it find something? What was the reason? It's not a black box. And then to actually give you the investigation tools to follow that process all the way through. Now this is revolutionary in all cases, but especially in the human trafficking arena. I'll give you just very quickly a use case about money laundering and how we actually identified a human trafficking ring at a bank. This particular bank was running a system. They had one of these supervised machine learning model systems. They were generating about 120,000 anomalies a year, about 10,000 a month. They were at somewhere in the high 90 percentile false positives. They were finding some things, but they also had some false negatives. And you know, when you're a bank and you have regulatory obligations and you have a false negative, that can be a headline. Well, in this case, they had some false negatives and the regulators brought it to their attention and had to take some corrective measures. So they looked for new technology and they brought us in. Now they gave us that same year's worth of data. But what we were able to do is instead of generating 120,000 anomalies for a year's worth of data, we generated about 4,200. And there's almost no overlap between the output our system generated and the output of that legacy technology. Where there was overlap, where there was a true positive that was identified, we actually identified 100% of those. But on average, 70 days earlier, and in most cases it was before the money actually left the bank. Because we don't have any rules, settings, thresholds, parameters, we actually identify things much earlier than those legacy systems. We also found all the other issues that they weren't able to identify through any means, except the regulators bringing it to their attention. And we further, we found a case of a human trafficking ring that had been moving money through this bank for years undetected. They were using a series of accounts that were using microtransactions. So they were running transactions at $200, 200 euros in this case. But they moved millions of dollars through this bank undetected. If we had more time, I could give you a few more details, but I know we're a little bit short today. So I'd like to have Rochelle share with you just a little bit about a human trafficking case, if you would.
Absolutely. So for us, we've done a lot of the manual work, as I said, so we're identifying victims and potential human trafficking situations, and then we're doing a lot of the human intelligence gathering, interviewing witnesses. And in this case, one of the victims, Cindy, had been in a domestically violent relationship in China, and when she finally left her husband, needed to care for her kid. And there was no opportunity. She was a middle-aged woman of a lower class in China, so there's no economic opportunity. And she started looking for jobs in America, you know, the land of dreams and upward mobility. Someone from her specific region in China was here, recruited her on WeChat, and used their shared community and culture to convince her that it was a safe opportunity. And when she came here, she was trafficked in a massage parlor in Flushing, New York. So it could have just ended there, and we could have just investigated that trafficking situation, which had a couple of different massage parlors connected to it, a small ring. But when we did broader analysis using big data and using really smart computer-based investigations as opposed to just what we know, we were able to find significant money laundering across the nation, connecting a case to 26 other states. And it was a really massive case that the FBI then took from the locals to help them because it was beyond what they could handle. So in doing that analysis, we saved not just the 3 victims in those 3 parlors, but hundreds of victims across multiple states. So the impact we're able to have is exponentially higher when we're leveraging sophisticated technology. Traffickers are using major encryption and a lot of tech too, and they're running circles around us. So stepping that up, we're able to extract women from the situation, help them get legal status, help them get legitimate jobs. And in this case, we were able to bring her son from China to be with her in the United States to be safe from the potential retaliation from traffickers' networks back home, and really make an impact not only for her, but the dozens of other jurisdictions and the victims in those jurisdictions as well.
I have to say, I've spent a lot of time with the law enforcement people who are on the front lines dealing with these human trafficking cases. And really the one that Rochelle just shared was really pretty lightweight compared to the lives that are destroyed, the innocence that's stolen. Little girls are really taken out of their homes in the middle of the night and sold into sex slavery. It really happens. And it happens way more frequently than any of us want to really acknowledge. And you know, at ThetaRay, this human trafficking initiative that we're doing with Rochelle and with the United Nations, this is all pro bono. This isn't, we're not making any money on this, but this problem is so extreme and it's so severe. When I talk with the law enforcement agents who actually deal with this stuff, I have to ask them to stop because I just don't want to hear it. And you know, that's the wrong reaction because of this problem is so extreme. But human trafficking is a global problem. It really is. And the key disruption is to raise the risk and to reduce the profit like we talked about. International cooperation and data sharing is key. We've got to get people together. It's got to be a big initiative. Intuitive AI is the only way. It's unsupervised machine learning techniques to be able to identify these unknown rings. It's the only way to really be proactive in terms of identifying these things. And we ask you to be a leader in your sphere of influence. The solution to this problem, it's in our hands. It's in all of our hands. It's in your hands. And if each one of us take some time and think about how we can influence our sphere and how we can contribute in some way to this problem, we really do have the power to eradicate this problem. Thank you very much for your time.